Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson.
Hi, I'm Marianne Williamson.
This is my third conversation with Marianne Williamson.
If you hold on to the resentment, you hold on to the grudge, you hold on to the attack thoughts, then you're actually deflecting the miracle that might otherwise occur.
Recently, she ran for President of the United States.
In 2020, I felt that I was given adequate, fair exposure. This time, there was an unbelievable effort to blacklist me, actually.
We explore the profound teachings of Jesus.
I was at a party, and there were these three men in tuxedos, and they were facing each other, and they were holding drinks like they were talking. And then an image that my subconscious produced, one of the men turned around, looked at me. It was indisputably Jesus. I saw it as Jesus. And he said, I thought we had a deal. If you make me better, I'm going to give my life to you. That was it for me. Something was like, got it.
I'm Sarah Grynberg, and this is A Life of Greatness. Marianne, welcome back to A Life of Greatness for the third time. How have you been?
Well, I've been, and I've been good. Right now, I'm good. I've been through some very dramatic experiences, I have to say. Running for president of the United States isn't a calm thing to do. And my country is in a bit of a maelstrom at the moment. But personally, I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking.
And tell me, I remember when we last spoke, you said to me, I'm going to run for the presidency again. And how did you find it different this time to last time?
It was actually quite different because in 2020, although I was certainly a minor candidate, I felt that I was given adequate, fair exposure on the media platforms that you need to be seen on in order for the traditional Democratic voter to even know you exist. So I was enough on CNN, on MSNBC. I was given a CNN town hall. This time, there was an unbelievable effort, even in Australia, by the way. I'll tell you what that story in a moment. To blacklist me, actually. I wasn't on CNN. I wasn't on MSNBC. There was a definite intention. Don't let people even know that she's there. The decision came from on high in the Democratic National Committee, what now turns out to have been a terrible decision, to suppress a primary, not allow there to be one, and to suppress the voice of any candidate who chose to challenge Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris. And that was perpetrated not only by American media, but by Australian, interestingly enough. I have friends, American news people, who went on a tour in Australia. And I don't know which of your major television news programs that it was, but they told me that he was interviewed and somebody questioned him about the campaign. And he's a major American journalist. And he said, well, the president has a couple of opponents, Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips. And he said that when they watched later from their hotel room, they watched the interview on television, your news program had actually edited out my name.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing that was happening here too, an unbelievable erasure of someone putting forth the exact agenda that now all the Democrats are saying is the one that would have defeated Trump. So it's quite a moment that we're all going through, and there's been such a crash and burn on the part of the Democratic establishment, which in a way you could say, well, maybe they deserved that, but the American people didn't. So I think that a lot of from things I was told, a lot of the Australian journalists thought they were being hip going along with some of that. Well, they weren't so hip going along with it because it turned out to have all been quite ignorant.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But why
I was sorry to hear that too.
Why would have they taken your name? Like, what would it have mattered if your name was there?
Oh, you mean in terms of the Australian
Yeah.
news program?
Yeah.
I don't know, Sarah. I'll find out which program it was. I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me
And
know.
maybe you want to look deeper into that. I don't know.
I will.
They said they were shocked. Yeah.
I'm shocked too. So as I said, I am sorry because we love you here. Marianne,
Thank you.
you have written your beautiful new book, The Mystic Jesus, which is something everyone should read. And it's interesting because when I started reading it, I thought to myself, Marianne and I are obviously very different people, but there are similarities between the both of us because I've always had a fascination in Jesus, but I am brought up Jewish. And in the Jewish religion, we don't really talk about Jesus so much. It's not the done thing. But I studied A Course in Miracles, and that's when my interest in Jesus became a lot stronger. And so then I'm reading through your book, and you talk about a similar thing when you started A Course in Miracles. And I love this bit that your dad said to you, your parents were a little perplexed when you started with A Course in Miracles, and your dad asked you, it's all the same God, isn't it? Can you talk to us a little bit about that and when you started to be fascinated in Jesus?
Well, like you, I'm Jewish, like you said. And I had studied comparative religion and philosophy in college. I had read St. Thomas of Aquinas, St. Augustine, Teresa of Avila, and was always fascinated by Christian theology. And like you said, Jews don't have a problem with Jesus. Jesus was a Jew. We have a problem historically with Christianity. That's a whole different thing, from Inquisition to pogroms and so forth. But like you, I was never told anything one way or the other. Like, they read that book, honey, and we read this one. But when I saw the Course in Miracles, because it wasn't a classroom, it wasn't an academic setting, I thought, oh, that must be a quote unquote Christian book. And, that's just not what we read. A year later, I saw the book again. And this time I actually opened it up and started reading it. I realized, oh, wow, this is not a religion. It says over and over, this is not a religion. This is what the Course itself calls a psychological mind training. And it speaks to people, as the Course says, from all religions and from no religion. It has to do with taking traditional Christian terms, but using them in decidedly non-traditional psychotherapeutic ways. So that what you're really talking about is not in the Course in Miracles, not the journey of one man 2,000 years ago, which is not to show any disrespect for that journey or for the religion that was built up around him, but applying the story of his life to the journey of every soul living at any time in history. St. Augustine said, ever ancient, ever new. He's talking about the life of the psyche when Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Well, that was thousands of years before the birth of Sigmund Freud, a long time before a deeper inquiry and investigation of the inner life of the human being the way we do now. So that now when we hear lines like from Romans, do not conform to the patterns of the world, but attain a renewal of the mind. It's like, oh, I get it. It's about not seeking the meaning of my life out there. It's about seeking the meaning of my life in here. And then the mystic Jesus has to do with Jesus as a kind of evolutionary elder brother, someone who attained while he was on the earth a complete self-actualization. He says in the Course, and I open the mystic Jesus with this line, I don't have anything you don't have. The only difference between us is I don't have anything else. I'm in a state that is only potential in you. In other words, we have the Christ mind, the perfect mind of love and of innocence within us. It was created by God. It's not in anyone more than in anyone else. But we are living in a world where we are so trained into thoughts of fear rather than love, that those fearful thoughts become like layers that cover up the light in us. Jesus is someone for whom all layers of fear have been dissolved. And he, the Course in Miracles says, has been authorized by God to help us should we call on him. And we don't have to call on him. And the Course in Miracles says it's not like he's the only way, not like that, but he is one way. If he's your way, you realize it. And he has the power to enter into your thought system and shine away your ego, to actually guide you through the psychological and emotional and spiritual synapses necessary to return to the loving perspective that is the truth of who you are.
When you reflect on your life and I suppose the wisdom that you know of the mystic Jesus, how have you used it in your day to day?
Everything from I have, let's say, a different person who it is difficult for me to forgive. Now, the Course in Miracles says you can choose. You can have a grievance or you can have a miracle. But you can't have both. So if your heart is open, then the universe is always ready to begin again. It's an opportunity creation machine. It is the handwriting of God. Wherever there's love, miracles occur naturally. So if you hold on to the resentment, you hold on to the grudge, you hold on to the attack thoughts, then you're actually deflecting the miracle that might otherwise occur. Okay, knowing that and understanding that abstractly is easy enough. But sometimes the trigger is so big, the wound is so big. In my case, someone who infiltrated the campaign made it so difficult, blah, blah, blah. So you might be willing, but that's when you call, let's say you call on Jesus and say, I am willing. I know that my two choices here are I can either be open, can learn from this, can grow, can atone, can forgive, and actually better things will even occur, or I can constrict and become bitter and become kind of a pathetic old woman. You have a choice, Marianne, but sometimes it's easier said than done. And that's where I think of Jesus, in those situations where it's easier said than done. And he has been authorized by God. If you want me to help you, I'll help you out there. And so when you ask me where I use it a lot of places, but forgiveness and forgiveness of self too, atoning for your own errors. He's like an evolutionary elder brother, someone who's just, he actually says in the Course in Miracles, when you have moments where it's difficult, call on me as would a child would call on an elder brother, and I will help you. He says that is no idle fantasy. And in my life, I find it's no idle fantasy. But you have to be willing. The Course in Miracles says your good intentions are not enough. Your willingness is everything.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Do you feel all our prayers are answered? Because I pray a lot and I believe that to be true. And I think it was Caroline Mace who said to me, a no answer is also an answer. But I would love your opinion on that.
Well, all our prayers are answered, but not necessarily the way we wish them to be answered. You know, the Course in Miracles says, if you have peace, that means that you listen to and are experiencing God's answer. And if you do not feel peace, you're not quite there yet. So I do believe that all prayers are answered, but prayer itself is in many ways not what we think it is. The Course in Miracles says that prayer at the highest level is not an entreaty of any kind. The prayer at the highest level is a oneness with God. So you stop praying for money and instead you say, dear God, whatever blocks I have that are keeping me from manifesting abundance and receiving it, accepting it in my life, please heal me. That's God's answer. It might not be a $500 check. It might be an insight. It might be a situation where you see that you're judging someone with money, or a situation where you recognize, wow, I just said no to what could have been a financial opportunity. So that was the answer. God's answer was showing you where you're keeping money at bay. God's not going to send you that $500 check. The manifestation in the world is merely a reflection of your thoughts. And he says in the Course, no one, not even Jesus, God himself will not violate his own laws. He will not come between cause and effect. Once God has created a law, it's unalterable. He says, but I will work with you on the level of cause. So when you say, could I please have money? Sometimes it will actually seem to get worse, because the Holy Spirit's gift is he's going to put a magnifying glass on the things that you do, or the things that you think that keep money at bay. So you might think God didn't answer when actually, he answered. He answered. He's showing you what needs to change in you for those things to occur automatically.
Wow, that's so fascinating. You talk in the Mystic Jesus about the fact that we have this separation at the moment, and how, their idea of oneness. And if we think about, our home, or people will call it heaven, from a lot of near-death survivors I've spoken to, there seems to be this oneness. And then we come here and we forge into this separation, and something like we talked about earlier with the election, it's just so dividing. And there is so much separation in all of our countries in the world to do with that and other things. How do we get back to that oneness, or how do we even do it just with ourselves?
Well, doing it with ourselves is where it all begins. The Course in Miracles, and this is another example of a traditional Christian line interpreted so non-traditionally in a metaphysical sense, and that is there is only one begotten Son. So many traditional Christians hear the line, there's only one begotten Son, and they think that means, and to them it does mean, that Jesus was the only Son of God. To the metaphysician, there is only one begotten Son means we're all it. God created us all as one. Now, my life changes if I realize that, because my experience then will be that the golden rule is simply describing how life operates. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, because whatever you do, you are doing to yourself. And even if they don't give it back, somebody else will in some other situation, because there's only one of us here. So once I realize that, I relate differently to people. Once I relate differently to people, my experience of things outside this one particular relationship begins to change. And that's how we put the world back together. We put the world back together one stitch at a time. There aren't 5 easy pieces, 5 easy steps, 5 easy bullet points to repairing the world. We repair the world one moment at a time, one relationship at a time, when we treat each other as we would like to be treated. And that happens when you realize, because you are treating yourself, there's really no separation between you.
Mm. You mentioned before about cause and effect, and I find that an interesting universal law, one that I've studied at length and I think about a lot, right? What you put out, you receive. And what was interesting as well in your book is you talk about how a lot of those old scriptures, or even when we look at the hieroglyphics, they're talking about these spiritual practices way back then. And we have this interpretation of them now. They were almost like clues for us. Talk to us about how the universal law of cause and effect works, and how people can understand it in a way that makes sense to them.
Well, it's really very simple. It's the same thing on the inside as it is on the outside. Every action has a reaction. Every cause has an effect. So I know, here's a glass of water. If I open my hand, this glass will fall. Water will get everywhere. The glass itself everything will splatter. I just know that. It's not that I'm faithful, it's that I know the law of gravity. Well, once you know that there are objective, discernible laws of the internal realm, just like objective, discernible laws of the external, it simply means that you understand. The Course in Miracles says all thought creates form on some level. Every thought we think takes us and those around us, since there's no place where you stop and I start, because we're all one. And we all know this. You go into a room and you can feel if people have been talking trash about you. You can feel it. And you can also walk into a room and feel where you're loved and accepted and embraced. We subconsciously know these things. So the Course in Miracles says you achieve so little because you have an undisciplined thoughts. And once you realize that every thought we think is a cause with an effect, we begin to be far more vigilant about minding our minds. Every thought has power, and the Course in Miracles says there's no such thing as a neutral thought. So every thought, and we're every moment making a decision. You might be making the decision consciously, you might be making the decision unconsciously. But every moment we're deciding you're going to open your heart here? Is your mind, your brain going to be connected to your heart here? Are you going to be showing up as best you can? Are you going to be thinking of other people as much as yourself? If you are in a state of namaste and love, or are you there to exploit, to use, to get what you want, not showing up at your best? There are different ways you can play life. And in every moment, you are deciding on some level what way you're going to play life. The way you choose to play it will determine the trajectory of events that flow from it. So it's not like you should. It just thought you might like to know. It's not like, Marianne, you shouldn't drop your phone. It's just, if you do, it'll fall and possibly break or whatever. And I think we're beginning to realize that about the internal life. The Course in Miracles, well, the Course doesn't say this, but I'm saying this. Notice how the word disciple and the word discipline come from the same roots. So to be a disciple of the great spiritual teachings is to seek to discipline your mind according to the dictates of love. And it's about training your mental muscles, just like you train your physical muscles. And at a certain age, if you're not working at keeping your muscles up, they're headed down. And the same is true with emotional and psychological gravity. Emotional and psychological gravity. Living in this world, if you're not working on proactively cultivating positivity, love, forgiveness, then you're headed down to cynicism, to despair, to anxiety. Because the world is what the world is, but we are always a choice. Who do you choose to be in the space of what is? Who do you choose to be, and what do you choose to think about the space in which you find yourself? It puts a lot of, we're responsible, not for everything that happens, but for how we interpret it and how we behave in response to it.
It's so true. And to anyone listening right now, I can't say that focus on what Marianne has just said, because for me, knowing that was completely life-changing. Before I understood my thoughts, they were erratic, and my life was so different, and not different in a good way. It was exactly what you said early on. My thoughts were a reflection of my outer world, and it was chaotic. And as soon as I studied the Course, as soon as I did the inner work, as soon as I understood how neuroplasticity worked and how to change my thought patterns and watch my thoughts, the more that my inner world changed, and the more then my outer world changed. And as you say, like, that within itself is such a miracle, but it does take work. It takes work. And a friend of mine said this to me years ago, and it's so true. We need to watch our thoughts till the day we die, because if we don't, all that kind of work doesn't just stay there. The negative thoughts start coming in and in again. So, thank you so much for all those wise words.
Also, I'd add to that a realization that the Course talks about, that there is no such thing as a neutral thought. So if we're not proactively working on the upliftment of energy around us, then whether we are actively trying to make something bad happen or not, we are subconsciously complicit with an energy that is spiraling down. I remember a woman years ago, she started dating an ex of mine or something, and we'd been dating and blah, blah. And I remember her saying to me, "I didn't mean to hurt you." I said, "You didn't mean to help me either." I think there are a lot of people in the United States right now who are very shocked by our election result. I didn't do anything to make this happen. Well, yeah, you kind of did. If you weren't working proactively and really thinking about what it would take to avoid this outcome, if you were just farming out your best thinking and your critical thought to a political entity that theoretically knew what it was doing, but if you really thought about it, why are you even believing that? So there's been a lot of wake up, a lot of growing up.
I wonder if this happens to you. I noticed that the more and more I got into my spiritual path, the more that energy became something I noticed a lot. So I walk into a room and I notice when people's energy is off. I notice when they're strange to me because something's going on with them. You know, energy to me has become this very sensitive thing. And sometimes it's like, oh, this is too much. I can feel when I meet someone, even if it's, you know, on a Zoom like you and I, if I'm interviewing someone and I feel like they're saying something but they don't actually live it, that becomes very apparent to me too. And I wonder how you deal with that.
Well, I think a lot of life is about becoming more savvy
Mm,
and not judging a situation like that, and yet removing yourself from any entanglement within it.
mm,
When I've never had the kind of experiences that I had in politics. You meet genuinely malevolent players,
mm,
and I'd never really experienced that before. But part of the malevolence is the way how easily you can get tangled up in some toxic systems. So a lot of the work is if you know that that person's energy is not a certain kind of righteousness. Of course, they're innocent children of God, but that th- do not take that walk with that person. In my book, A Woman's Worth, I told a story, and I hope that I can remember it correctly. Someone had told me a story about when you're at a certain level of development, you're on one side of the street. Oh, I can't remember it exactly, Sarah. Something about
We can
uh,
paraphrasing is fun.
yeah, okay. Something about if you know there's a snake, at first you're attracted to the snake. The second is you think you can beat the snake. The third is that you walk away and you walk to the other side of the street. So I think that sometimes in the spiritual journey, because we want to be loving and we want to see the best in people, that this can lead to a lack of sophistication. Sometimes if someone's energy is less than loving and there are patterns there that you recognize as not healthy, sometimes the lesson is with love, don't go there.
Mm, that's so
That's
important.
what I've learned.
Yeah,
Learned it the
it's
hard way, by the way.
it's so true. Um, you talk about in the book, The Mystic Jesus, about a journey that you had. And this is one where you were lying in bed one night and you saw a figure at the end of your bed. And you said something to God, which was so beautiful. You say, if he would help put your life back together, you would dedicate the rest of your life to him because you were going through a really hard time at that moment, well, for a while. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that leads to a part in the book where I talk about Jesus at the cocktail party. So I had been through really a tragic situation, very difficult. And I would wake up. I was already a student of the Course in Miracles, but I didn't, you don't have to do the Jesus part. It's not thrown at you. It's just mentioned. It's there, but no one is trying. There's no proselytizing. There's no. So I'm having a very difficult time sleeping during that time, and I began to um, recognize, the term shade.
Mm,
It was a sense at the end of my bed, a tall, thin figure, perpendicular, not looking at me, just sitting there, perpendicular, looking away, but at the end of my bed. And there was no fear attached to it. It was clearly a shade. It wasn't like a man was there. And I thought, oh my God, could that be Jesus? And I began to have a strong sense of accompaniment by a presence. And I thought, this must be what the Holy Spirit is. And it gave me a great comfort. And during that time, I was seeing a psychiatrist, which was very helpful, and I was doing the Course in Miracles, but I realized I was really in trouble. I was really in trouble. And I said to God, if you will help me, if you will put my life back together, if you will kind of give me Marianne back, I will give my life to you. And then I started getting better slowly but surely. But as I started getting better and I could be happy again and life was starting to be life again, this sense of presence that had been so comforting began to feel a little, I don't know about creepy, but a little bit of like, excuse me.
That's all right.
This presence began to feel a little like, I don't need this, And so it was like I wrote a Dear John letter to God. I was trying to blow off Jesus. I was like, I'm really grateful to you for having been here for me this way. Thank you so much. But, I'm sure there are people who could use you, for whom you being around all the time will feel really good. And thank you so much. Right? So not long after, I know, hey, thank you, but I'm fine now. Thanks. Not long after that, I was at a party at a house in Houston where I was living, and people were dressed up, and it was a very big house, but the rooms weren't that big, so you were floating from one room to another, at least in that part of the house. I don't know. And I walked into this room, and there were these three men in tuxedos, and they were facing each other, and they were holding drinks like they were talking. And then in what, I always say the Holy Spirit works through your subconscious mind, an image that my subconscious produced. One of the men, he was on the left side, turned around, looked at me. It was indisputably Jesus. I saw it as Jesus. And he said, I thought we had a deal. And there was no emotion to it. There was no, I thought we had a deal. Nothing like that. It was, I thought we had a deal. In other words, I had said to him, if you make me better, I'm going to give my life to you. What happened? And that was it for me. Something was like, got it.
The Course in Miracles says, if you knew who walked beside you, you'll never be alone. Can you talk to us about that? Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that means? I mean, it is what you just spoke about, but in the sense that we do have, I suppose, God or whatever you want to call it, always with us.
The kind of social systems that dominate our modern world, particularly the economic system, has produced a great sense of randomness and ultimate meaninglessness and isolation and separation and fear. There's like an epidemic of loneliness. And the Course in Miracles is saying, you are not alone on this earth. This earth is not some random set of disconnected dots. Your pain comes from your thinking that it is. But the Course, in any serious spiritual or religious path, is about developing a new set of eyes. One of the exercises in the Course is, beyond this world, there's a world I want. If I'm only registering life as evidenced by my physical senses, then there's nothing particularly meaningful about it. But there's another way of seeing. I'll give you an example. Wow, I've met Sarah before. Wow, Sarah's doing wonderful work in Australia. Wow, it's really interesting for her to talk about what she's doing. Wow, women are really amazing now, isn't it? Wow, isn't it interesting that Sarah incarnated in Australia? Wow, I wonder what she's going to do with her life. In other words, I'm completely at choice. Do you want to look at this as meaningless? And I don't know, it's a podcast and maybe you'll get clicks or whatever, because that will not give you any peace into your soul. The Course in Miracles says nothing in this world has deep enough roots to sustain you. But if you see it as, wow, everything has meaning, and
Mm.
isn't it amazing the way things are set up, and everything is cosmic order, and there's a holy purpose, and people are assigned to each other so that we can do more together than we could have done alone, and exponentially wonderful things can happen. And isn't it amazing the voices of women coming together? I mean, you are a choice. And when you say, if you only knew who walked beside you, if you don't, to me, that means if you only knew that there was a guide to all this, planning all this, like he says in the Course in Miracles, I am in charge of the process of the atonement. I know who you would best meet to be able to take you, them, and the world to the next place. I am in charge of it all. None of it's an accident. It's the lesson for you and the lesson for the other people. This idea of central intelligence on some cosmic level, call it Jesus, Holy Spirit, God, whatever. It's a whole different experience of life.
It is. It's
And that's why
interesting.
Einstein said either everything is a miracle or nothing is a
Yeah.
miracle.
I just wrote something about this literally this week that Einstein said God doesn't play dice with the universe.
Yes, he
Meaning
did.
exactly what you just said. Nothing is random. And I think about that always. I think, and it's actually, it's been really good in the sense that it's not, it gives you a lot more happiness. Like when things happen that are out of my control, it might be someone works for you that leaves, or someone passes away, or, you know, a friendship dissolves, whatever it is. It doesn't bother me to the extent that it did, because I know that everything is happening for me, not to me. And everything in life is a perfect, is putting, the way that you said, God is putting everything together perfectly, even if you can't see it like that.
The Holocaust did happen. The Rwandan genocide did happen. So it's important for us to understand God didn't do that. God didn't do the Holocaust. People did. God didn't
Yes,
cause the genocide of Rwanda. People did. And so it's important for us to recognize where free will fits into all that. The
absolutely.
Course in Miracles says God's will has never not been done. Ultimately, all will be love. Ultimately, those situations will end. However, how long it takes is actually completely up to us. So we can't just be passive within that. I saw that with my campaign. How could it end up this way? You know, I've had professional endeavors that were very successful, professional endeavors which were not. So I'm like, well, what happened? Why was God there or that one and not here? Well, Marianne, it was a little more to it than that. It was more than that God was there. It was that you were there. Right. So I think we want to be careful. We are here to co-create with God. The Course in Miracles says you can learn through joy or you can learn through pain. It's not up to you what you're going to learn. It's merely up to you whether you're going to learn through joy or through pain. So I think that that's an important part of the journey and of the maturation that comes about when we realize. And I think that that's an important thing too, Sarah, for the higher
Absolutely.
consciousness community, because I think we get a little la-la about the whole thing sometimes. And, oh, it's all good. Well, actually, it's not all good necessarily. And it will ultimately be all good. And the possibilities are always all good. But how you interacted with the possibilities determines what your experience of them will be. Now, the Course does say this. If I behaved in a way, let's say, so think of consciousness as a computer. So the perfect you is an undeletable file in the computer of your consciousness, because God does not create anything other than the perfect. He created all of us as one. That's the one begotten Son. That perfect Christ mind is in you. That perfect Christ mind is in me. But you and I, from the time that we were very young, the Course says, were taught a thought system that will tempt us constantly to bring the file down to the screen that is not the perfect you. It's the scared you, the angry you, the needy you, the victim you, the selfish you. Now, when I bring down to the screen the imposter self, the ego self, the angry me, the needy me, the controlling me. This is what I love about the Course. The miracle I could have had if I had downloaded the angel of my better nature, the Christ self, the miracle that I could have had, but that I deflected because I brought down a different thought and behavior, the Course says the miracle I could have had is held in trust for me. It will be held in trust for you, the Course says, by the Holy Spirit until you are ready to receive it. So then the Course says the same situation, it won't be the same people, it won't be the same location, won't be the same circumstance necessarily, but in some way, a situation which challenges you and invites you in the exact same way is going to come back. How are you going to play it this time? So life is always about download your better self, download your better self, download your better self. Because if you download anything else, God's not going to stand in between cause and effect. Now, were we destined to meet because God plans all things? Absolutely. Right now, as an example, were we destined to meet? Yes. But how you and I choose to play it is completely up to us. If one of us was rude to the other, or if either of us didn't really show up doing our best, holding a space for the other, how we play it is up to us. That we're fated to meet is his part. How we play it is ours.
It's so true. I had something, it actually only happened a couple of days ago, where I had a situation about a year ago, and I was like, I'm not sure if I really played that in my best. I didn't show up how I maybe should have. And this was a personal encounter. And then literally, it's like the carbon copy happened actually with the same people a year later. And I'm like, all right, how are you going to do it this time? Because you're not even being shown a different situation. You're actually being given the same one with the same people.
Isn't that amazing?
And I was like, I knew it. I knew it exactly, and I played it much better. And even though parts of me wanted to do something different, I was like, I can see the message here, and I am going to do what you want. Because I know that is a better outcome. And
exactly.
It's crazy when you see it. It's crazy.
Well, every situation both invites us to be better than ever and challenges us and tempts us to fall back into those patterns, those mental habit patterns, behavioral habit patterns, emotional habit patterns that represent the lesser possibilities of selfhood.
It's so true.
And when you see that and you realize every moment represents something you have experienced before, and you can play, if you played it well last time, good. Why don't you even try to play it better? But you might be tempted to fall back.
Yes.
And then also this part of the Course this part of the Course I can't even tell you I totally understand. But the Course says everything you experience, you're actually just remembering. So I can't even say I fully grok that one, but it does say that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Something that the Course does say, and you talk about so beautifully, is that about God's perfect accounting system, and how when we're betrayed, and it happened to me not long ago, a couple of years ago, but still, it was very hurtful, how it's not up to you to sort that out as far as you pay back that person because they did something wrong to you. Can you talk to us about this accounting system that the universe has?
Yeah, the Course, not the Course, but a friend of mine once said to me, the universe keeps a perfect set of books. So there is a line in the Bible, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So the Course in Miracles says that line, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, means, Sarah, God is saying, I'm going to handle this. I don't need your help. I don't need you to get in there. If that person mess with you, I'm going to balance that in that person's life. You stay out of it. Let me handle this. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And it will not be with vengeance. It will be with balancing, because God sees these as mistakes to be corrected. And if we get into thinking, oh, I'm going to get back at that person, then I'm just continuing the wheel of suffering. and I will remain at the effect of what they did. It's kind of jujitsu, it's like, get away, just stand back and let the boomerang occur so that it's that person's energy and you're clean of it. So it's hard because, you want to strike back. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. This is not, you just step aside. I'll handle this much better than you can. And it's not, and it will not be through punishment. My ego says that person deserves to be punished for what they did, right? And you feel at the moment like if I forgive that person, I'm condoning what they did. But that's not what it is. It's stepping aside, because if I give meaning, if I attach meaning to what they did to me, I'm dooming myself to experience the effects of what they did to me. If I'm willing to extend my perception beyond the body to what I know to be true in their hearts, then I am freed, because I have moved into the different realm where only love exists. So forgiveness is something you're doing for yourself. And that includes, quote unquote, well, it's like when we were kids, I remember with my brother and sister, he did it first. Peter did it first. It doesn't matter who did it first. Your karma is your karma. So step aside. Their lessons will be coming in their lives. And your lesson is to not get held back or involved or entangled in their lesson.
It's so
No
true.
matter what they did to you, it can be a gift to you if it becomes an opportunity for forgiveness.
Yeah.
A lot easier said than done. And the Course in Miracles says enlightenment begins as an abstract concept that then takes a journey without distance from your head to your heart. But like you said, you saw it while it was happening.
That's so beautiful. I wonder, for anyone listening who is struggling with faith, who, might be in a situation where they feel that it is hard to keep moving forward, maybe in their work life, in their personal life, and it's hard to have faith in the unknown. How could we tell them that it's going to, that it may be okay, that there is, having faith is something that has gotten me through? And I wonder.
Don't believe it because of what Sarah says. Don't believe it because of what Marianne says. Try it and see if it works. Try it and see if it works. You come to the point, it's like a plane, and the plane's going through a big bank of clouds. Well, the pilot knows the horizon is there. The pilot just can't see it. So the pilot flies on instruments. Faith is like flying on instruments. I know the love is there. I know the miracle is possible. I just can't see it. But in terms of, quote unquote, struggling with it, try it. Take the situation that you're thinking about that's difficult, put it in God's hands. Say, God, I don't even know if you're there. I don't even know if this works, but I'm willing. So Jesus, if you're there, I'm not saying I'm a big believer, but if, just in case, I am willing to see them as innocent. I am willing for love to overshadow my consciousness. I am willing to forgive. I am willing to see this differently. And if a miracle is possible, I am willing. And then just see what happens. Don't believe it because of anything somebody else says. Just try it and see if it works. That's what I would say.
The Course says a miracle is just a change of perception. And when I learnt that, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so true. You look at something in a certain way and it's doom and gloom, but hold on. What if I didn't look at it like that? What if I looked at it through another lens, a lens that was one that was going to make me feel a lot better? Bang, there's your miracle. And it's so beautiful. I wonder, Marianne.
The Course
yes, sir. Go on.
I was just that the Course says that and I think I mentioned this before, that miracle is an intercession from a thought system beyond our own. Yeah.
What is some of the best advice that you have ever been given?
Get over yourself. This is not about you. Other people are experiencing things here too. What can you do for them? The Course in Miracles says only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. The ego makes it all about you. And when you make it all about you, the Course in Miracles says, don't look to yourself to find yourself. That's not where you are. You find yourself in relationship with other people because it is a reminder that you're not alone and separate. And the problem is thinking we are alone and separate. So if I'm only thinking about myself, no matter what I'm thinking, I'm fostering the belief of my separation, and there's pain there. So get over yourself, make it not just about you, think about what the other person is going through, and voila, it's like, wow. That's the only way to serve yourself, is to serve others. On a spiritual level, you only get to keep what you give away. On a material level, if I give it to you, I no longer have it. Spiritually, I only have it if I give it to you.
That's so true. Service is such a beautiful thing. I wonder, Marianne, what has been your greatest mystical experience?
I've had a lot of mystical experiences, and I think in a way, the mystical is not about a particular experience, but about a sense of flow, a sense of living in a realm. Not that you're not grounded in the material. The Course in Miracles says about Jesus, he lived on earth, but thought only the thoughts of heaven. I think my greatest mystical experience is just finding myself able to live a peaceful life in the midst of so much chaos.
One of the lines that Jesus had that is my favorite is when he was on the cross, and this talks about when he was asking for forgiveness for the people that were about to kill him, and he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And I just have always thought about that line because I just think it's so unbelievably beautiful that someone who is about to be killed is able to even realize that. And, we touched on forgiveness earlier. I think that when we're able to do that, and we do that to allow ourselves to be free, that's one of the things that will give us a lot of peace.
Well, it's not just that he did that when he himself was about to be killed. He did that as he was being killed. And the Course in Miracles says the crucifixion is a radical teaching example of someone who, even in the midst of the deepest darkness, the Course in Miracles says, what could be darker than the torture and the murder of an innocent man who had done nothing to hurt anyone and so much to help so many. And even in the midst of that, the complete destruction of his body, in the space of his mind being completely open to love, and his having achieved a state where even in the midst of that, he did not deviate from love, that literally shifted the molecular order of the universe so that in his death, he did not die. He says in the Course, prove I did not die by proving that I did not die in vain. And the point, here we're about to be in the Christmas season, the idea, and you look at Hanukkah, the festival of lights, light that appeared in the midst of darkness. It's really very much the same issue here, that God's answer to darkness is greater light. God's answer to death is greater life. And that with Christmas, the metaphysical meaning of Christmas, Mary gives birth, the human heart, Mary is that divine feminine impregnated by God. And then the Christ is given birth on the earth. And that's why the mystic Jesus is not just about the birth of Jesus as a human being 2,000 years ago. He says, I am born again in you. In any time when you open your heart and let love extend itself, that is me. You are giving birth to Jesus. And then also, I think it's worth mentioning, just as Mary is the divine feminine, Joseph is the divine masculine. It's that aspect of consciousness which navigates the material world while all this is happening. The divine feminine is pregnant with this new self. The divine masculine is making the plane reservations still. Anyway, making sure that the material world, that everything's grounded while you're going through this spiritual experience.
Christianity talks about heaven and hell. Do you believe in that?
Well, the Course in Miracles says heaven is not a condition or a place. It's an awareness of our oneness. And hell is what the ego mind makes of the present. You know, when you're anxious, you're nervous, you're depressed, you say, "This is fucking hell." Actually, it is. When you're holding a lover in your arms or a baby in your arms or out in nature and you go, "This is heaven." Actually, it is. The Course in Miracles says heaven is entered 2 by 2. It always involves a sense of oneness with someone else, with that which is bigger than you.
Beautiful.
But you know, once again, when Jesus said those things, when those things were said thousands of years ago, psychology as we know it didn't exist. But human beings were having these experiences. So then they get interpreted certain ways, and then they're handed down to us certain ways. And that's what's happening now with this mystical revival. Oh, that's what that means. Wow.
I love that. I wonder, Marianne, what is your favorite prayer?
Well, God's not up there going, get the words right. I mean, I have certain lessons in the Course that I love. Into his presence would I enter now. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. But once again, the highest level of prayer is not an entreaty of any kind, the Course says. It's just a sense of being with God. Don't forget him as you go through the day. Don't let social media eat your brain. Don't let your temptation to be annoyed with that person make you forget they're going through hard stuff right now too. And in that sense, we can begin to live life as a prayer. I think that's the most important thing.
Beautiful. And our final question, Marianne, what is a life of greatness to you?
Simple love. Simple act of love. What is that line from Mother Teresa? Small acts done with great love, something like that. A life of greatness is a life where you are capable of being centered in the midst of chaos. You are capable of being peaceful. You are capable of being present for other people. You are capable of contributing. You are capable of being of service. You are capable of centering yourself in the presence of God. Now, do great things happen because of that? Books, pop, whatever. Yeah, that happens. But that happens naturally as expressions of those things. That is not the greatness. That is a natural product of the greatness. And sometimes the greatness, you know, in the 1980s, I was very involved in the AIDS crisis. During that time, a few years later, my first book came out. It was a huge success, A Return to Love. And I always had a sense that the reason that book was successful was because I wrote it at a time when there was such depth in what we were going through at that time. So somebody might say, oh, wow, she wrote this great book. She, you know, no. Whatever was truly powerful was not that book. It was the space I was in of really, it was pure service at that time and pure, you know, I wasn't even, the word bestseller wasn't even, it was so far from my consciousness. It was that love. It was a period of great love. That's the only real greatness there is.
Marianne Williamson, there is a reason that you're a great spiritual teacher. And when I had this conversation with you today, it's been a few years, And I remembered it again. It's always so lovely to talk with you. You are so full of deep wisdom, and everyone needs to read your book. Thank you so much for the conversation
Thank
today.
you so much. I'm a great admirer of yours as well, Sarah. Great to talk to you again, and I hope I see you at some point.